Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive, and I am here with a reader question on how to regulate emotions. Now, full disclosure, this question is a little scary, and I'll explain to you why it's scary, but there's something robotic about it. There's something about this question that's makes me think of sci-fi movies and robots and worlds without plants and worlds without flowers and worlds without emotions. And I think you'll see in a moment what I mean, at least I hope so. Okay, so the question is, it's more like a topic. It says regulation of quantity of emotion. When I feel emotions, it is an onslaught of jumbled emotions and sensations. So the best way to manage that is to turn it all off. How can I select the appropriate emotion in the appropriate amounts for different situations to be more effective in managing my states? Now, this is why I'm a little creeped out by this. It's super technical, and it sounds like trying to manage a robot. You know, it's like, how do we dial this down? How do we adjust these settings? How do we maximize this for maximum productivity? How do we control the output? So there's something about that that's just, it's a little creepy. And I hope you hear that. If not, if you're like, well, I don't understand, then you definitely need to watch this video. So unfortunately, we live in a world where emotions are, for the most part, not taken very seriously. And on the other hand, we also have a lot of people who don't know how to deal with their emotions in a healthy way. And they're just like throwing their emotions around. And then they're like, well, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. You've got this kind of stuff, right? So on the one hand, we've got this kind of Western approach that says emotions are irrational, they're a problem, they're inappropriate, you have to have the correct response. This whole idea of civilization being, we have to manage how we present ourselves all the time. So that, and on the other hand, people who are indulging in their feelings and kind of living in them a little bit too much and throwing them around and being like, I'm just emotional, this is just what I'm feeling, and getting, aggressive, or just their emotions are all over the place, right? So what that does is that there's a lot of people who are afraid of their feelings. They don't know what the purpose of feelings are. They're like, why do I have feelings in the first place? They're just annoying. They're like in the way. They're like embarrassing me. They're making me look bad, right? And if you were raised in a narcissistic family, or if you have a lot of narcissistic traits, and sometimes these go together, right? If you were raised in a narcissistic family, you learn from your parents how to deal with emotions. And narcissistic people pretty much hate their emotions, apart from maybe anger, which they can use to manipulate people, and throwing a pity party, which they can also use to manipulate people. But they're not really connected to their feelings in an authentic way. So when you grow up in a narcissistic family, you're taught that your emotions need to be appropriate. They need to be the correct emotions to show the correct response to make everyone look good. It's all about looking good, right? So if there is a death in a family, then you have to cry the appropriate amount at the appropriate time. And but then you have to stop, because otherwise it becomes embarrassing or it becomes a burden for people, right? And there's all these rules about how you're supposed to feel. And that's not what emotions are about at all, right? That's trying to control it from your mind, saying, this is the right feeling, this is the wrong feeling. That has nothing to do with why we have emotions or why emotions are there. Your emotions are the most honest part of you. They're telling you what is really going on with you, how things are really affecting you, what's really working for you and what isn't. But most of us grew up being emotionally illiterate. We never really learned what our emotions mean, how they're trying to help, how to deal with them in a healthy way. So then we just look around what the parents are doing. We're like, okay, I guess I'll just do what they do. Or I'll just do the opposite, right? So this is why this question creeps me out a little bit, because wrapped in this question is this desire to make emotions more controllable and to make them appropriate right? So it's all about appearances. It's like, this is the right response for the right moment. This is how I'm supposed to behave. If I behave like that, then people will see me in a good light. But if I cry because something makes me really sad and people don't understand, it makes me look bad and I don't want that, so I need to moderate my emotions. That's kind of what it feels like, what is not blah. That's kind of what it feels like is behind this question, right? This desire to control emotions from up here in the head, where the head decides this is the right emotion, this is the wrong emotion, this is what needs to come out now. And that's not how your emotions work. And it's having it the wrong way around, right? Your mind needs to learn how to listen and understand and interpret your emotions and create space for processing them, space that is separate from reacting. Because a lot of people don't know the difference. They're like, if I feel something, I'm going to do something. It's like, no, there's steps. You feel something, that's an inner job. And then if you feel it well, if you know how to really feel things, you don't need to act right away. You have time. You have time to decide what is the right response here. But the right response is based on your feelings, not on your head, right? So there is a appropriate response. But trying to jump from, I have a lot of feelings and they're overwhelming, to what is the appropriate response and how do I get there, that's trying to get there too fast, and it's skipping a lot of important steps. Because in order to get there, you need to give yourself time and space to really feel your feelings first. And so it sounds like the person who's asking this is just wanting to skip that step entirely. It's like, it's just a mess of emotions. I don't want to deal with it. And I think it's a he, because of all this focus on efficiency. Maybe it's not, maybe it's a woman, but I'm going to assume it's a he. And so all this focus on efficiency, appropriate, be more effective, this is very businesslike. This is like the 7 most effective emotional techniques to influence people, something like that. And that's not what your feelings are about, and that's not how they work. So also, the best way to manage all that is to turn it all off. That is the worst way to manage all that. That is seriously the worst way. Okay, so one of the things I ask when people send in a question is, what if you already tried, right? And so this person's saying meditation practice and bodily awareness. Okay, meditation practice can be really great, but a lot of people, when they meditate, they try to create silence, or they try to numb things, or they try to reach for a higher state, which they think is better, and they're not actually using the time to connect in with their body. And as a highly sensitive person, it's super important to take meditation time as a cue for connecting in with your body, listening to what's going on inside. And, even if it's loud and if it's noisy and it's chaotic, you can still listen. Even if there's 20 people on the inside screaming at you, because sometimes it feels like that if you have all these different emotions. It's like 20 different people are screaming at you. You can still make an effort to sit there and listen. So, it's like, so this approach of there's too much of a mess in there, so I'm just going to shut it off, is saying a lot of things. It's saying, I'm afraid of my emotions. If I take time to listen to them, I don't know what's going to happen. So that means this person doesn't have that process in place for working with emotions on the inside first. So that means they go straight from feeling something to reacting, right? And that's not healthy, and that's not something that is going to help you, and it's obviously going to look bad, but also it's not what your emotions want you to do. Because when you just react, you don't give yourself the time to really listen and really check in with what you really need, right? And often when people react, they just end up blaming. So they're like, I was fine, and then you said something, and now I feel bad, so it's your fault. And they just lash out, and they just try to, make the problem go away, right? So that's why it's super important to build in this inner time. It's like something happens, you feel something, you take time to feel it, and then when you've taken the time to feel it, then you come up with an appropriate response, and then you can. So it's less about the response, it's more about learning how to spend time with those emotions, because when you do that well, the appropriate response will come naturally. But that being said, the appropriate response doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to love you for it, okay? So sometimes the appropriate response is getting really angry and saying, this is not okay, and just going up to someone and saying, no, I demand that this changes, or that you do this differently, or that you look at this again. right? So creating a bit of a fuss can be really important, and it can be exactly what your emotions are telling you to do. If there's something that's really, really important, sometimes you have to create a fuss to get the point across. So if you're only concerned with how it looks, and I look like I'm out of control, or I'm not supposed to show this emotion, or I'm feeling judged, or I'm judging myself, or that is not the right way to respond, you're not tapping into the power of your emotions. Emotions are energy and movements. They're about getting things done. They are about letting things go that need to be let go of. They're about doing things that need doing. They're about finishing things that need finishing. They're about showing you what's safe and what isn't. So they're really important, and they don't really care about what is appropriate, okay? When there's something important at stake, the last thing you should think is like, ooh, what is the appropriate response right here? It's like, no, that's not the point, right? Like, that is not helpful. So you want to give your emotions space. You want to give yourself space to be a little messy, right? Being authentic is a little bit more messy than kind of the Hollywood polished version, always looking perfect. That's not real. That's not real, and it doesn't really get things done, and it doesn't really work. Okay. So another thing this person was saying in this request was, maybe there are shortcuts that I'm not considering that I can use in a pinch. Here's a creepiness factor again. This is, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. He's already spending no time dealing with his emotions because he's shutting them down, right? So his approach for dealing with his emotions is, I feel emotion. I notice there's a lot of different emotions. I don't know what to do with them. They scare me. I think they're inappropriate. I'm going to shut it down. So that's his emotional practice. And then he wants shortcuts that he can use in a pinch. So it sounds like what he's asking is, right now it takes me about a minute to shut down my emotions. Do you have a technique so I can shut them down in 10 seconds flat? No, I don't. And I know that may not literally be what he's actually asking me, but there is that direction in this question. This is kind of where it's going, right? It's like, okay, yes, I need to deal with my emotion, blah, 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 but I really just want to get rid of them and shut them down. I always ask too, when people have a question like this, why are you asking me, not someone else? And, this guy is saying, because I want to retain my sensitivity, but still be happy and open when I engage with the outside world. Okay, so in theory, I'm all for this. But I think, especially in the context of the rest of this question, what this person is asking has nothing to do with sensitivity and openness and actual happiness. Because if you're trying to shut down your emotions because they're too complicated and they're too different and you don't know what to do with them, and you're saying, I want to retain my sensitivity but still be happy, happiness is not like the opposite of difficult feelings. Okay, happiness is one of the emotional states, or one of the ways of being, one of the experiences we have. But sometimes people think that happiness is shutting down everything that is not happy. But that's not a recipe for happiness. That's a recipe for illness, insanity, dissociation, and trying to be a robot. I don't recommend that. So I think what's going on here is this person has a lot of difficult feelings they're judgmental of, feelings they don't like. Maybe they're angry, maybe they're afraid, maybe they're confused, maybe they're disappointed. And they're thinking, if I start to let these feelings come up in interactions with other people, I'm going to be snappy, or I'm going to be unhappy, or I'm not going to be so willing or open to do certain things. And I don't want that. I want to maintain this kind of open facade, this happy facade, even though behind the facade, there's all these other things happening. So there's this it's like I want to build a little wall, right? I want to control in my head how I'm going to behave, how I'm going to look, PR. I want to do PR for myself. I always need to look on point. And everything that's going on, I don't want anybody to know. So how do I shut that down? But that's like shutting part of yourself down. That's saying, how do I amputate all the body parts that are acting up? So I was like, oh, I have a little itch here, cut it off. Ooh, my hair is a little bit weird, cut it off. oh, my ear is a little burnt, cut it off. So it's like everything that you don't like, that's annoying you, you're like, that doesn't look good, just cut it off. That would be insane if you did that with your body. But there is this tendency for people to do this with their emotions. They're like, this emotion, I don't like it, cut it off. How do I delete it? How do I get rid of it? How do I ignore it? But ignoring it or pushing it down or building a wall does not make it go away. It just makes the emotions more permanent, more annoying, more persistent, and in the end, it turns into psychosomatic pain, where you start to have tension in your body, you start to have, maybe you feel more constricted in your breathing. There's lots of things start happening where your body's like, we're trying to hold on to all these emotions for you, but we're running out of space, and we need to put them somewhere. So it starts to impede on your happiness, actually, right? Because at some point you can't pretend anymore. So when you feel like you still have the space to pretend, you can like, oh, I'm just going to stuff my emotions down, I'm just going to avoid them. But at some point you're going to hit your max and they're all going to come up, and then you're going to feel like, oh, I can't get away from my depression and my rage and my sadness and all the other feelings anymore. They're like all over, right? So it's much smarter to start actively working with those feelings, learning how to process them, learning how to really be with them. Because when you fully feel them, you're fully with them, when you really understand what they're trying to tell you, they disappear, they dissipate, they go away. And they don't linger in the body, and they don't create all this emotional clutter. But if you're trying to figure it out in your head only, and you're just trying to make the feelings go away, they're going to create problems. And you're going to develop a different kind of sensitivity, which is actually a more narcissistic kind of sensitivity, which is, I am offended and hurt and upset by all the little things that other people do. Why? Because I have mountains of unprocessed grief. So when somebody does something that makes me a little bit sad, all the sadness comes up. When somebody does something that makes me a little annoyed, all the anger comes up. When somebody does something that makes me a little fearful, all my repressed fear comes up. Because having a little bit of the feeling, when you have these big repressed buckets full of it in your body still, will activate those feelings that are still in your body, that are unprocessed, that are like waiting to come out. They're like, listen to us, please. So, if you keep pushing it down, you're going to have this narcissistic sensitivity, which is, don't do this, don't say that, you can't do this, it's all very painful to me, right? Everything hurts, everything is hurting me right now. And then trying to get away from those feelings still and saying, it's your fault, you did this, you made me hurt, you did this to me. So having almost no buffer, no space to say, oh, well, maybe they didn't mean it that way, or maybe they did mean it that way, but it's not that big of a deal. When you have a lot of repressed emotions, everything becomes a huge deal. And then you're definitely not happy anymore. And then you're definitely not acting appropriately. So what starts as a desire to behave the right way, and then turns into a process for pushing the emotions away and trying to shut them down, eventually you'll get the exact thing you don't want. You will act inappropriately. You will be unhappy. You will be lashing out at people for no good reason. Because all that emotion that's just like contained inside, that's just like, it's trying to get out. It's like this volcano that's about to explode. And at some point you can't hold it down anymore. Okay. So, a little less effectivity, a little less efficiency, a little more focus on, oh, these emotions are actually the most honest part of me. Because your brain is full of shit. My brain is full of shit. Our brains are these containers, all the rules and all the facts and all the ideas and everything that anyone's ever told you, it can go in there and it can live there. So your brain is not exactly a source of truth. It's a tool. It's a way to figure out things. If you have good rules in there for, making decisions, your brain can definitely help. I'm a big fan of healthy thinking, but your brain doesn't tell you much about who you are. Your brain is just regurgitating everything that anyone's ever said about you that you somehow hung on to. Your emotions are a much more honest representation of who you are. Because even if your brain is like, okay, that sounds like a good idea, I should be able to do that, if it's not sustainable for you, your emotions will speak up. Now, one caveat, there are people who create a lot of emotion through the way that they think. Okay, and that's a little bit different. So the way that I've been talking about emotions is your emotions that naturally come up in the body that are intuitive, really, that are like your intuitive reactions in the form of emotions, to what is happening in the world. It's your truest self trying to communicate with you. But if I start thinking to myself, everything's stupid, everyone hates me, this is all wrong, and I just start recycling those thoughts, I'm gonna get angry. I'm gonna get afraid. I'm gonna feel all kinds of things just because of the thoughts. So it is important to check, if you're having a lot of difficult feelings, what's going on in your brain. And if your brain is just filled with all these negative thoughts, that's a good place to start. And that is where most people start. The only thing is that's not the full story. So the common explanation of emotions these days is your thoughts create your emotions create your actions. Now, this is really helpful if you have a lot of shitty thoughts and you don't understand, like, why is everything going wrong in my life? But your mind is like, bah, 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 bah. It's really helpful to remember thoughts create emotions, emotions create actions. So if I want to change my life, I need to change my thoughts first. It's very good, but that's not the full story. And when you are intuitively tuned into your body, you're checking in, you'll notice there are also feelings in the body that come from the body itself. They come from the body itself. And I know as I'm saying this, there's a lot of people who disagree with me on that. They're like, nope, it's just thoughts, emotions, actions. Right? So everything can be controlled in your head. But this creates that problem where we're back in the head. We're back in this approach that says the mind is a master of everything, which is, historically the Enlightenment's dream. It's like, let's all be rational, let's not be savages, we are different because we're civilized, everything needs to happen up here. And of course, it is good to have rational discussions about things, put things on paper, argue for things logically, right? I'm not saying that anything that you feel just goes and has to become a new thing and a new thing we do, but it can go too far. And so a lot of this logic first goes too far because now the brain is in charge, the mind is in charge of everything. It's like, this doesn't sound logical, so I'm not going to do that. Your emotions are often not logical, but that's why they're so powerful. They're able to cut through all the noise, all the conditioning, all the stuckness, and say, even though everything makes sense in your head, you're still feeling sad. So what is that about? And in your mind, you're like, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense. Your body's like, you're still sad. And so your body's trying to get you back in touch with, like I said, your truest part of yourself, your real unconditioned self, let's say. The part of you that's not affected by everything you should be and should do and you're supposed to do and everything you learned. It's just coming from this impulse of like, this is what lights me up, this is who I am, this is what I care about. That's what your emotions are connected to. So that kind of emotionality is really, really important. And it's not something you want to shut down. It's not something you want to be super efficient about. It's something you want to make space for. Okay. If you're listening to this and you're like, Caroline, okay, it sounds interesting, but I don't know how, what steps do I take? I have all these difficult emotions. What do they mean? I understand. Like it's complicated and there's not a lot of good resources for that kind of thing out there. A lot of resources on emotions are pretty superficial. They're like, yes, you have to feel your feelings, but nobody shows you how. And you're like, I want to feel my feelings, but I don't know what to do. So if that's you, if you're thinking that, I have a whole bunch of audios on difficult feelings, what to do with them, including some classes, a class on what to do with anger. That was an hour-long class that I recorded live with lots of questions from people, and a class on what to do with panic attacks even that I added recently. A lot of difficult emotions, from rage to panic to fear to grief to, like, there's a whole list. And what those emotions are really trying to tell you, because they're not trying to tell you that you're stupid, they're not trying to tell you to give up on life, they're not trying to tell you that there's no point to anything. They're trying to tell you very specific things, but when you've never learned what it means, It just feels like pain, and it just feels like something you want to get away from, right? So what I've done is I've created audios for different specific emotions, talking about what they mean, what they're trying to tell you, so that your brain gets on board and your brain is like, okay, yes, I see there is a point to this. Because if your brain or your mind is not willing to engage with your emotions and is just afraid of it, it makes everything harder. So having that explanation, what are these emotions really trying to tell you? And then including practical steps where, okay, what do you do with these feelings? How do you actually feel them? So that is all inside the Happy Sensitive Library. You get access to all of those audios and a whole bunch of other courses for highly sensitive people with one simple membership. So if you're struggling with your feelings, you're like, I'm not sure what to do with them, check that out. The only thing is, I'm not going to give you a, what was the request again? A super effective shortcut that you can use in a pinch. That's not what I'm going to do, because we're already doing too much of that. We're already trying to I'll just spend 30 seconds trying to manage this. And what you really need is in-depth, step-by-step practices that you need to spend some time on. But the good news is, the more you practice, the more you'll be able to use this in a pinch, and the easier it will be to use it in a pinch. But it's not a different technique. It's just a lot of practice. You can do it quickly too when you need to, right? But in order to do that, you need to spend time with your emotions. All right, I hope that was helpful for you. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.